Shalom. This is Rabbi Abraham Fisher speaking to you again, and this is Parsha Highlights and Insights. This week we're going to talk about Parashat Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. Even though it starts off with the words Chayei Sarah, this was the life of Sarah, we actually begin with talking about the death of Sarah. Let's take a quick look at the outline we've prepared for this parasha, and we'll see that in Parashat Chayei Sarah there are four major events. So we begin with the death of Sarah. Remember that Sarah has been working side by side with Abraham from the very beginning, bringing to the world an awareness of the existence of one and only one God. As Chazal teach us that Sarah communicated with the women while Abraham communicated with the men, but they complemented each other. But now, after the Akedah, we are told that Sarah dies. She is 127 years old at the time of her death. And Chazal understand that her death coincides with the Akedah. And that would mean, by the way, that at the time of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, that would mean that Abraham was 137 and Yitzchak was 37. Yitzchak was 37 and not some little child, as is often portrayed in the arts. Sarah is 127 years old, and Abraham comes to bewail her. After the Akedah, it says that he went to Beersheba, but he was only there temporarily, and now he comes to mourn for her. He needs a place to bury her. And the place to bury Sarah is not only going to be significant in terms of her burial, nor even just for the burial of her and eventually Abraham, but it's going to be a burial plot for the entire family, for the founders of the people that Hashem has told Abraham he is creating. And consequently, it will be the first piece of land that will be purchased in the land of Israel, in the land of Canaan. So it's a very significant event that Abraham is about to purchase a piece of land. He requests a burial place from the Hittites, from the Chittim, the Bnei Chet, who control the land. And apparently, and as we read through this passage, it seems that purchase of a piece of property is not simply a matter between two people, the current owner and the one who wants to purchase it, but it is of concern to everyone, all of the landowners in the area. There seems to be a council of landowners. They're called the Am Haaretz, and the transaction has to take place in their presence and with their approval. So he makes the request, Abraham makes the request that he can purchase a burial place from the land of from the Hittites, from the Bnei Chet. And further he says that one of their number, someone named Ephron Hachiti, who is currently owning a piece of property nearby Hebron, the cave of Machpelah, as well as the field in which it's found. So Abraham says, please make the request. I wish to buy that piece of property to be a permanent burial plot for my family. So he doesn't speak to Ephron directly. He speaks through them. And as we follow through, it's very formal, the way they speak to each other. Ephron, in front of all of the Land Registry Council, says, we have a great deal of respect for you, Abraham. Please let me give you this piece of property as a gift. And Abraham insists on paying the full price. He doesn't want it to be a gift. He wants to pay the full price. And in the negotiations, in the course of the negotiations, Ephron slips in the piece of information that this piece of property is worth 400 uh, pieces of silver, 400 silver coins. And but he says, but what should that matter between two people such as us? Abraham understands and weighs out the precise price using a currency that is acceptable to all, and the sale is made, and in the presence of everyone, it is very clear that this piece of land, this cave, uh, and the field in which it is found will belong to Abraham's family, and it will be the place for the burial of the founders of the people. And so, not only is the sale made, but it is recognized as being permanent. Then and only then does Abraham bring Sarah for burial into the cave. The cave is situated in an area of Hebron uh, in the land of Canaan, and it is known from that time on that this piece of land belongs to Abraham and his family. So that's the first incident that the Torah tells us about. The truth is that after the death of Sarah, Abraham has to work primarily on preparing the next generation of leadership. And that, of course, is Yitzchak. Of all of Abraham's children, Yitzchak is the one who will be the next link in the chain of creating the Jewish people. And Yitzchak currently does not a have a wife. And so the next section, which is the largest section of the Parsha, is about finding a proper wife for Yitzchak. Torah starts off by telling us that Abraham at this time is old and he is wealthy, and that would suggest that many people would want to be connected to Abraham through marriage. However, Abraham has very, very clear ideas about whom Yitzchak should marry. Yitzchak is going to be the next of the patriarchs, the next link, as I said, of the chain of creating the Jewish people. It's very, very important that Yitzchak marry the appropriate person. Abraham brings his chief servant, the head of his entire household. Now, throughout this entire passage, this servant is never named. He's always called the servant of Abraham, Eved Abraham. But our rabbis teach us that this servant, the head of Abraham's household, is the same servant, head of Abraham's household, that we met much, much earlier, named Eliezer, Domestic Eliezer, who was a very important student of Abraham and has followed Abraham from the very beginning. So he brings the servant, and he makes him take an oath. He makes him swear. And some of the elements of the oath are as follows. First and foremost, under no circumstances is my son to marry a Canaanite. The Canaanites, the local people, are idolaters. Their idolatry is of course, abhorrent in every way, and therefore none of the Canaanite women are suitable for Abraham's son. Second of all, says Abraham, so since none of the local people are appropriate, so you must find a wife from my place of origin, where I come from my family. Go back there, where I come from, which is to the east, and you'll find a wife there. Presumably, in that area, there are still people who are monotheistic as Abraham is. Maybe not to the same extent as Abraham, but certainly they are suitable. So, next element of the oath is go back to my birthplace and see if I can find, see if you can find a proper wife for my son. Now there's some back and forth because the servant says, well, if I go and I find an appropriate wife for Yitzchak, however, she does not want to come here. She wants to stay there, and so the question is, should I come back and bring Yitzchak to her? At which point Abraham says, under no circumstances is Yitzchak to leave the land. Yitzchak may stay, it must stay in the land. Either the woman agrees to come here or find somebody else, and keep looking until you find the appropriate person. But Yitzchak is not to leave the land. Our rabbis teach us the reason why Yitzchak is not permitted to leave the land is that at the Akedah, Yitzchak was sanctified to be what Chazal called the Olah Tamimah, the perfect, whole, burnt offering. Even though Hashem said that Abraham is not to slaughter Yitzchak, nevertheless, Yitzchak was sanctified for this purpose, and he retains that status for the rest of his life. He has to live out the rest of his life as a living, breathing sacrifice to God. And among the ramifications of that is that in the same way as a sacrifice may not be taken out of its precincts, for example, certain sacrifices may not be taken out of the Beit HaMikdash, out of the temple, or other sacrifices may not be taken out of Jerusalem. So Yitzchak also has a precinct, and that is the land of Israel. So Abraham says, under no circumstances is Yitzchak to leave the land. And if you cannot find a suitable person that, according to my stipulations, then you are free of my oath. You've done what you are supposed to do, or at least you tried, and there will be no punishment forthcoming. And of course, he also prays that Hashem bring the servant success for this very, very important journey. So, next stage is the journey to the city of Nahor. The city of Nahor being Abraham's brother. The city is the city of Haran, and he begins the journey. Before he goes, he takes 10 camels laden with the wealth of Abraham as a way of demonstrating what kind of life this woman has in store for her. She will be taken care of, and she will live in comfort. And so the servant begins the journey. When he gets closer to the place, he turns to Hashem in prayer. He and the camels stand by the well, and it's evening time. It's the time when all the families are going to need water for the rest of the night and for the early morning, and that's the time of the day that the girls, the young women of the family, go out to the well in order to draw water for the family. So it's at this point that he prays, and he says to Hashem that I am standing here by the well. Please bring about success to what I'm trying to achieve. The daughters are coming out. I want to see who is the appropriate girl to marry Yitzchak. And here's what I will do. I will ask for water to drink, and whichever girl first goes along with my request, fulfills my request of giving me water, but also offers to water my camels, that is a demonstration that she is the right wife. Very clearly, this is a test of character to see if she's a person of kindness, person of chesed, because that characterizes the house of Abraham. And chesed, kindness, means giving and the desire to give. So not only uh, does she will she agree to what is requested of her, but because she desires to give, she will give even more. That will demonstrate that she is the right person. No sooner does he finish this prayer that the fulfillment of this sign, this character test, begins. Rivka comes out. Rivka is the granddaughter of Abraham's brother Nahor, and she has her pitcher on her shoulder. She is an attractive uh, young woman, um, and she begins to fill the the pitcher and begins to go up. The servant runs to her and asks her for water, as he has just prayed and said that this is what he will do. And she says, "Please drink." And of course, she gives him water to drink. And when she finishes giving him water to drink, she offers to water the camels as well. I will draw water for the camels as well, as much as they need. Now let's stop and think about what's involved here. Uh, Camels can go for a very, very long time without drinking. Uh, they've been traveling quite a distance. So this is an opportunity for the camels to replenish their water supply. That means that each camel is going to drink quite a bit. And there are 10 of them. Uh, there may even be more. 10 carry all of the wealth. Maybe there are more camels that are used for riding, but certainly 10. So in order to draw water for the camels, uh, Rivka, it's more than just taking from her pitcher and pouring it out for the camels into a watering trough. She had to empty it, empty the pitcher into the watering trough, and then go back multiple times to the well in order to continue to fill the watering trough for the benefit of the camels. She does it many, many times, and she does it with great speed. She runs back and forth. And of course, the servant is amazed that his request, that his prayer is fulfilled or apparently fulfilled so very, very quickly. And when the camels uh, finish drinking, he engages her. First of all, he gives her a gift in thanks, and he asks, "Whose daughter are you?" And furthermore, uh, maybe it's possible for me and my my troop to spend the night here with your father. And she says who she is. I am the daughter of Betuel, who was born to Nahor. Remember, Nahor is the brother of Abraham. And she says that she has plenty of food in the house for the animals as well as a place to stay. And the man uh, bows in thanks. So after he gave her a gift, and then the servant blesses and thanks Hashem for not having abandoned him. Hashem has brought this about very, very quickly. Uh, so Rivka returns home, talks to her family, and Rivka, we are told, has a brother, and his name is Lavan. He's another important personality that we'll learn about, and Lavan is not as pure of character as Rivka is. When Lavan hears about all of the wealth that this man apparently is bringing, so uh, he Lavan runs, invites the servant um, to stay. Uh, Please don't stand outside. I've um, I've cleared the house for you, and you certainly can come. And the servant is served food. However, he insists that he is not going to eat until he's had an opportunity to to explain who he is, and they tell him to speak. And it's at this point that the servant retells everything that we've seen in this chapter. Uh, I am a servant of Abraham. Abraham is wealthy. He has a son. The son is not married. My master Abraham made me swear that I must bring a wife only from his birthplace, and uh, under no circumstances any of the Canaanite women, and also she must, of her own free will, uh, be willing to go back to live in Canaan. Uh, Under no circumstances is Yitzchak going to leave. And he retells this in detail. Um, and the Torah is not satisfied with just saying in a few words of summary that the servant said what happened, but rather he tells the story detail by detail, and the Torah records it because these words are very beloved to Hashem and to the Torah. When he retells all of this, the family of Bethuel says, "Well, this must come from Hashem, that this has happened this way. We must be grateful, and we must go along." And so there are words of blessing, and they say um, there are gifts that are given. The servant gives them gifts, and they have a lovely feast because they seem to agree that Rivka should be able to go back to Canaan and marry Yitzchak. However, the next day, their tone seems to change. When he says, "You have to let me go," um, they say, "Well, wait a bit. Don't go back so soon. Give her some time, and give her maybe some days or months or maybe even a year." But the servant is insistent that either they allow him to fulfill his mission, or he will go and continue in in another direction to look for a wife. And so they say, "Well, let's bring Rivka and ask her, is she willing to go?" And they ask her, and she says that she is willing to go. And so her family gives her a blessing. It's actually a similar blessing. It is the same blessing that we give a bride on the day of her wedding. Um, so may you turn into thousands and 10,000s. Um, and so after blessing her, they allow her to go. And then Rivka joins the servant on the trip, the journey all the way back to the land of Canaan. There's a moment where Rivka sees Yitzchak from a distance, and when she asks, "Who is this?" She is told that this is Yitzchak. She puts on a veil, and when she comes closer, she lets herself down off the camel, and there's, as I said, an encounter between them. Um, and the servant tells Yitzchak all that has happened. Here it's just summarized in a few words. And so Yitzchak marries Rivka. It says he brings her into his tent. The tent, which was originally the tent of his mother, Sarah. And he marries Rivka. She becomes his wife, and he loved her. So very telling that the love that he has for her is talked about after the wedding. Not that he fell in love with her first and then married her, but rather he agreed that she should be his wife. He married her, and from that point on, the love grew. And we're told in the concluding part of this that in this, Yitzchak found consolation after the loss of his mother. The last part of the Parsha talks about two other issues. One, the last days of Abraham, and finally, the last days of Ishmael. Very little left to the life of Abraham after the after the death of Sarah, certainly in terms of action, although he lives quite a number of years. Um, we are told first that Abraham marries a woman named Keturah. There's a discussion in the Midrash whether Keturah is a different woman or a different name for Hagar. But be that as it may, he marries her and has a number of children, and there are even some grandchildren that are talked about here. Uh, but the son that Abraham designates to be his heir is, of course, Yitzchak. Yitzchak will be, as I've said, the next link in the chain of the creation of the Jewish people. And so he gives his entire estate to Yitzchak. Uh, and then he also gives gifts to the other children, the children of Hagar and the children of Keturah, or two different names for the same person. But he gives gifts to all of them, and he sends them away. He sends them to the land of the east so that the focus can be placed entirely on Yitzchak. And so Abraham dies at the age of 175. And we are told that Yitzchak and Ishmael come together in order to bury Abraham in the cave of Machpelah, to bury him near Sarah. So this is uh, one lovely indication of a kind of reconciliation between Yitzchak and Yishmael. And the truth is that Chazal's position on Yishmael is that although he had a wild youth, and that Sarah was completely right in recommending that Yitzchak be raised separately from Yishmael, but personally, Yishmael was able to straighten himself out, as evidenced by the fact, among other things, that Yishmael is together with Yitzchak at the time of the burial of Abraham, and that Yitzchak is placed first, which means that even though Yishmael is 14 years older than Yitzchak, he recognizes that Yitzchak is the main child of Abraham, and Yishmael gives Yitzchak that proper respect. So this is why, this is one example of how what our rabbis say, that Yishmael did tshuva as he got older. After the death of Abraham, we're told that Hashem blesses Yitzchak. Okay, we don't have an example of Abraham giving a blessing to Yitzchak, of Abraham transferring the blessing that he had received from Hashem to Yitzchak. So that role falls to Hashem himself. Hashem gives Yitzchak all of the blessings, and Yitzchak is able to flourish. Now we're very soon going to focus on Yitzchak exclusively, but before we do so, the Torah very briefly summarizes the last days, as we might call it, the generations of Yishmael, because Yishmael is going to be not at all central to the rest of the story. So we deal with him in a very general way, so that we can focus all of our attention on Yitzchak. So we are told of the descendants of Yishmael, all of his children. The Torah calls them chieftains. They are the heads of their own tribes. Although our rabbis also say that this chieftain situation didn't last, but nevertheless, we are told that Yishmael has 12 princes, 12 tribal chieftains, as it were, underneath him. And the Torah goes on to tell us that when Yishmael dies, he is 137 years old. And finally, the Torah points out where who Yishmael's descendants were, and where did they settle, in what area did they settle? They settled up to Egypt, but apparently not in Egypt. And that brings us to the end of Parashat Chayei. What I thought we'd do is take a close look at uh, one part of the parasha when uh, Yitzchak marries Rivka. Vayevi'eha Yitzchak ha'ohela Sarah imo. So Yitzchak brought Rivka, into the tent of his mother Sarah. Vayikach et Rivka, and he took Rivka, vatihilo leisha, and she became to him his wife. In other words, she took her as a wife, he married her. Vaye'ehaveha, and he loved her. Vayinachem Yitzchak, Vayinachem Yitzchak acharei imo, and Yitzchak was comforted after his mother, meaning he found comfort after his death, after the loss of his mother, in his relationship with his wife, with Rivka. Rashi comments on the tent of Sarah. He says, "Vayivi'eha ha'ohela," he brought her to the tent. "V'na'aset dugmat Sarah imo," and he became an example of Sarah, his mother. In other words, Rivka uh, resembled Sarah in certain significant ways, not outward appearance, but in terms of uh, spiritual achievement. So Rivka was just like, was an example of Sarah. How so? Kilomar, that is to say, Vaharehi Sarah Amo. And behold, she, Rivka, was Sarah, in the sense that she was a continuation of what Sarah had achieved spiritually. Remember, we said that Sarah was the one who worked side by side with Abraham in bringing the message of monotheism to the world. And Sarah is gone, but Rivka continues that. Shekol zman Sarah kayemet, as long as Sarah was living, haya ner daluk me'erev Shabbat le'erev Shabbat. There was a candle that was burning, sounds like miraculously, from one Friday to the next Friday. Candle that could burn that entire time. So if we're talking about a miracle, then we understand that Rivka's existence continues that miracle. But it could also mean very simply that Sarah made sure that there was light at all time in order to keep people happy, in order to make it possible for them to learn Torah. So that was the situation while Sarah was alive. The next is Uvracha mitzuya ba'isa, and blessing was to be found in the dough. Okay? When Sarah prepared the dough in order to make bread, uh, that very mundane task of providing her family with bread was imbued with blessing from Hashem. So perhaps it meant that a small amount of bread could go a long way. And the third is Va'anan Kashur al ha'ohel. And there was a cloud attached to the tent, tied onto the tent. Now, if wherever you go, for as long as Sarah was alive, there was a cloud on the tent, I think we'd have to agree that we're not talking about a typical physical cloud. We must be talking about a manifestation of God's presence. And it was through Sarah that all of these demonstrations of God's blessing and God's presence took place, not only in the merit of Abraham, but in the merit of Sarah. Umisha meta pasku. But once she died, they stopped. All three of these things that we've just said stopped. Those three things were, first of all, that there was a candle burning from one Friday to the next Friday. There was blessing to be found in her dough, the dough with which she prepared bread. And there was a cloud, a divine cloud, a cloud that demonstrated the presence of Hashem was on the tent. Umishe meta, but once she died, pasku, they stopped. They had stopped. As soon as Sarah died, all of these stopped. However, ucheshebat Rivka, but when Rivka came, she joined the family, the extended family. Uh, Chazru, they returned. All three of these elements returned. So Rivka, on a very important spiritual level, is a continuation of Sarah. This is the reason why Rashi adopts the position that is found in the Midrash that Rivka was born when Sarah died, because Hashem would not leave the world without the requisite quota of tzaddikim. So as Sarah was leaving this world, Rivka was entering into this world, and that's kind of an underlying idea here as well. That these miracles took place during the life of Sarah. They disappeared, and then through Rivka, they returned. Well, I hope this has been a helpful explanation of the outline of the Parsha, as well as some special insights into the Parsha. This is Parashat Chayei Sarah, and many people find a way of connecting with Parashat Chayei Sarah in the city of Hebron, because Hebron is mentioned in this parasha. It's the place where Abraham made the first purchase of Jewish land, we can call it, in the land of Israel. And so there are people who try to make an effort to be in Hebron around this time of year. Be that as it may, this is Parashat Chayei Sarah, and I hope you found these insights helpful. I am Rabbi Abraham Fisher, and until next time, I wish you shalom.